Vivienne Edgecombe, welcome to Unbroken.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to see you. So, why don't you tell us about a little bit about your background and how you came across the three principles?
Sure. My background has been mostly in human resources throughout my career. And I that led me through a whole raft of personal development, professional development, and combinations of the two um, throughout, 25 years. And I came to the UK in 2009, and I wanted to study NLP with Jamie Smart, which I did. And Jamie at the time was just starting to explore the principles. And so his NLP had a little bit of a different flavor about it, I think. And when he started teaching pure principles rather than NLP, I kind of went along for that journey and never looked back. Really, it made so much sense to me, and I got so many insights from it, and things just shifted and changed. So I didn't and still don't really see any reason to veer off that path, because it just makes sense to me.
Mhm. Yeah. And so you mentioned being in HR, and had you
Mm.
also felt like you were a bit of a seeker? Like, was there some searching going on as well?
Uh, I would say so. I don't know if I would have termed it that at the time.
Hmm.
I think it was, but I definitely was looking at, oh, next cool thing, next interesting thing to learn, next thing that could help me, that could help someone else, because I was doing quite a lot of coaching in my HR jobs. And so, yes, there was definitely one of those, that mindset of, oh, this is a great thing to add to my toolkit. And oh, and great, now my now my toolkit's complete. Oh no, it's not. What's the next thing?
Yeah.
So the toolkit was ever expanding. um, and and it is funny, and I'm sure you've heard it before, that when I came to the principles, a whole lot of stuff fell out of the toolkit. It just didn't seem necessary to me anymore. And I it's like the load got lighter, and my mind got a lot quieter
Mm.
when I was sitting in front of someone, whether it was in my job or a private coaching client. There was a lot less noise in there while I was trying to listen to them and help them, because I didn't have to think, oh, which technique am I going to use now, or oh, I'm gonna do a double whammy, whatever, on
Yeah.
on this issue. So it just simplified things actually a lot, which
Hmm.
was uh, a relief, really.
Hmm. So it
Yeah.
sounds like you were able to take it back to your HR clients and your private clients right away.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I guess it took me a little while. The things fell out of the toolkit not all at once.
Mm.
uh, but and I guess finding my own understanding and my grounding in what I was learning. But yeah, it feels like it didn't take too long before it just made more sense to have that conversation than any of the other conversations that I'd been having.
Right. Yeah. Oh, nice. And you and I have spoken before on a previous podcast
Hmm.
that I had. And one of the things that you shared that where the principles were really impactful, and I didn't write this down on my list of questions, but was that your journey about having a child was
Mm,
really affected by the principles. Could you share a little bit about that with us, please?
sure. Um, I love talking about this.
Okay, good.
um, yes, for quite a number of years, I'm sorry, my cat's just come in. I don't know if you can hear him talking to me, but
No.
for for quite a number of years, I was in a position of wanting to have children and not believing that I would, and so having a lot of thinking, a lot of upset, a lot of uh, round and round circular thinking, um, and it was impacting my relationship, and it was how can I put it? I often term it my tumble dryer phase, because it just felt like I was in this thing that was going round and round and round, and I couldn't get out. And there was no, I was talking to anyone I could find, whether it was at work or at home or whatever, to try and get some answers. I don't even know what the question was, but it was, if I look back, it was probably, could I be happy without children? How could I convince my husband to want children, because he was older than me and had a family previously, and he didn't want to go around that track again. And in my searchings, no one ever told me that I could just be happy. There was no message of, everyone took it pretty much as seriously as I was at the time, which is not a reflection on anybody at all, but it's probably more of a reflection of society and the value that we put on, or the identity that we make for ourselves around this whole thing of having children or not. And when I first had an insight, this was before the principles, but I had an insight that I had been making up two futures, and only two imagined futures. There was the grey one without children, and there was the beautiful Technicolor one with children. And I realized in a moment that both of them were made up. Neither of them were real. And I think in this realm of childlessness, as it tends to be called, people can semi-accept that they might have made up the Technicolor one, that they might be looking through rose-colored glasses at what the future might be like. But they tend not to realize that they're making up the other one as well. The one that says you can't be happy, or that you'll be sad forever, or all of those messages that we get when we want children and we can't have them. So in that moment of realizing, oh, I've just made both of those up, and actually the world is full of infinite possibilities, and I have no idea what my future will look like. It was like everything opened up for me. It was just a different experience. Then it was, oh, right. So if I don't know what my future is going to look like, what do I feel like doing? If I think, well, it's not going to include children, then what? What shall I do? Not in any kind of pressure or purpose kind of way, because that's often the next thing. If I'm not going to have children, then what's my purpose in life? It wasn't about that at all. It was just, what do I feel like doing? And after that was when I came to the UK and started learning with Jamie, and that I realized through understanding the principles what had actually happened to me in that moment of insight, what had taken place. And from there, I just got insights upon insights about how my value as a person, as a woman, how I was already complete, and that there was nothing that I needed to complete me, whether that was a child or a relationship or financial security, as they call it, or any of those things. I was okay. I was complete here and now. And that, building on the, oh, you've imagined those two futures, Vivienne, just transformed everything for me. It's I guess I don't define myself in any way about whether I have children or not. It's not something that enters my kind of, it doesn't really enter my head unless I'm having a conversation like this, of course. And I certainly, I don't think of it as a defining feature of me at all. And all the labels that go with it in society, like childless, that doesn't make sense to me. Child free doesn't make sense to me. I'm just a person who doesn't have children. I don't it doesn't define anything about me as far as I'm aware.
Right. Yeah. And to me, that just speaks to really the power of insight, because something that was so important to you for so long, and as you said, you were in your head circling around about it for ages, and then in one moment you just realized how you were making it all up, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I can laugh now.
Right.
And I could laugh pretty much immediately when I had that realization. And for a lot of people, I know it's not a laughing matter, and it wasn't for me until that happened. But what that also what I also realized along this journey was that, but that's not unique to me. I'm not special, and so anyone can have an insight that can change things for them, that can make a full 180 on whatever it is, whether it's about having children or whether it's about something else. We're never stuck, or we're only as stuck as we think we are. That way.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's such a great story. I love hearing you talk about that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So you've written a book called 28 Days of Resilience, and I'd love to hear. So I was thinking about this morning while I was getting ready for our call. We can approach the principles from several different directions. And I'm curious about why it was that resilience was sort of the inroad that you took, and why you incorporated that in the title of your book.
I think, and it's going back a little while now, so I hope I'm not just making this up. I think I've always felt it as a resilience paradigm, if that makes sense. This understanding gives us such a solid foundation to navigate life with, and that to me is what resilience is. I mean, resilience as a term applied to human beings really is a made-up thing, probably relatively recently. I don't think that people, even 100 years ago were talking about resilience. They were just getting on with life. So yeah, I think when I talk about resilience, it is that that ability to, I mean, we're all always navigating life. It's not like we need a special ability, but it's understanding as we navigate that we're okay, and that we'll have what we need when we need it, in face of the inevitable challenges that will come up along the way, because no one gets through life without having stuff happen, as far as I can tell. I haven't met anyone yet. And we all deal with it. We're it's interesting to me when people say, oh, I don't know how I'll get through this, because, and I have often said to my clients, you already are. You're already getting through this. And there's something that lets us just take the next step and the next step and the next step. And that's what I think, if we want to put a label on it, I think that's resilience.
Yeah. And so the book obviously it's called 28 Days of Resilience. It obviously walks people through exploring what you've just described. And so where do you begin on that journey with them in the book?
From memory, so it's a little while since I opened the book, actually. Maybe I should have refreshed my memory. I would start, like I start with my clients, really exploring how we are creating our experience of life through thought. So I guess it's a step away from how we usually think life is happening, to a step closer to truth, I would say, about how life is happening. So looking at the innocent misunderstanding and the innocent misconnection, if that's a word, that we've made between our circumstances and our experience, and disrupting that connection and helping someone to see that actually the element of thought has been missed out in that equation, if you like. We've forgotten that actually in between experience and in between our circumstances and our experience is a world of thought. And in fact, the world of thought carries on when the circumstances or the events or the situations have gone. So thought really is it. It's the beginning and the end. So that's where I start, and that's where we start exploring.
Oh, nice. So shifting gears slightly, I was poking around on your website the other day, getting prepared, and you have a free webinar called Life in Color. And so I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that and what that phrase means to you.
That goes back to the childlessness story.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. When as I mentioned, when I was in that tumble dryer phase, I had these two futures mapped out in front of me, one that was grey and one that was in glorious technicolor. And when I was talking with our colleague, in fact, Laura White, and we wanted to do a podcast together about that subject, and we were looking for a name that wasn't anything to do with either of our individual works, and we came upon Life in Color because in that community of people who would term themselves childless, I think there's a perception that life can't really be in color. There's always going to be a grayness or a muting of the color, and we've just wanted to kind of go that open, and that's why on the podcast, and we haven't, so it's called the Life in Color podcast, and we have an Instagram page, and when you go on it, you just see this. We got a beautiful watercolor. I think it's a watercolor. It might be anyway, it's a beautiful just blob of different beautiful vibrant colors that we use as the theme for all our posts and things on Instagram.
Oh, nice. And yeah, I can imagine if someone has something like that, like having a child that's so important to them, that proceeding without it and believing that I'm trying to find the words to describe. It's like, yeah, that they might feel that they're sort of living life with one of their limbs missing, or with this experience that feels vital, and
Yes.
sort of tolerating, the rest of their lives without this thing that was really important to them. And I can see that can happen in all kinds of different ways. Like if someone, as you said, it wants to be in a relationship and hasn't found the right person, or wants to find the right job and hasn't really, that hasn't really clicked for them. Yeah. And the weight that can bring, I'm sure, to people's lives, it must be so relieved by realizing that they're making it up essentially with their thinking.
And I love hearing from people, because I wrote a book as well called Already Complete about the same subject, and I love hearing from people to say, oh, I read your book, or I listened to it on Audible, or and I listen to the podcast and, something shifted. I feel different. Feels like someone said, I feel like I've been in winter and now I can see spring.
Oh, nice.
That's exactly it. And that's exactly, I wrote in the book about the void. People talk about this, there's this void that can't be filled. And I wrote in the book about the void, that there actually is no void, that's made of thought too, and and that it disappears of its own accord when we realize what's going on, because it never existed in the first place. um, and that's and I also know that when you're in the depths of it, that's really hard to get your head around. And getting your head around it isn't how it works anyway.
Mm.
but but it's lovely. You don't know what you're going to say that's going to click with someone, or that they're going to hear on the level that they might need to hear it. But I just figure that the more things I can put out there, the more likely it is that someone will hear something that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? We never know what's gonna,
No.
stimulate an insight. Yeah. And so you're involved with two other coaches in something called the Alchemy Academy. Tell us about that and why you chose the word alchemy.
Yeah. The Alchemy Academy came about with my colleagues, Zoe Patrick and Ali Scott, when we were talking, because we're all, Zoe and I are from business backgrounds. Ali's been longer in the coaching and therapy kind of side of things, although she had a business background to begin with. And we just were talking about how we could help more people in more ways. And we decided that we would like to start going into businesses to talk to leaders in particular about performance and well-being in the organization, what that means, and leadership, and all of that stuff, culture that kind of makes an organization do better. And the Alchemy Academy name came up because alchemy, to all of it, like when the word came up in conversation, we all kind of went ooh. because alchemy is, well, what I guess there's a number of definitions, but we see it as this seemingly magical process of transformation. And that's, to us, that's how it feels, when you're just in conversation with someone and they hear something that shifts things for them, 10 degrees or 180 degrees, whatever, it makes a difference. And there's nothing that you had to do to them or that they had to do for that to happen. It's simply it's a natural thing that happens to us when we see something different. And so alchemy, we knew that alchemy would be part of the title once we kind of fell on it. And then academy, we wanted to give the sense of the three of us, and the fact that this was it wasn't just magic. There was some there was something behind it that was more structured and more of a framework that we could take into organizations.
And how long have you three been working on that together?
It's just over a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
nice.
So it's still young.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And can you share a bit about what some of the organizations have seen, or what their experience has been?
Yeah, well, so far most of the work we've done has been around resilience and around relationships, like client relationships, and how to get past the barriers that we might perceive are in the way. And a lot of that we work on uncovering blind spots, and people find that really helpful to understand that, you know, there's if this is all the knowledge in the world, this, I'm making the shape of a circle for those who are just listening and not watching. If that's all the knowledge in the world, we have such a minuscule piece of that within us. And then there's all the stuff that we know that we don't know. But then there's all the stuff that we have no idea that we don't even know. And there are so many answers in there that are available to us if we can start looking more in that direction of what we haven't seen yet, what we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the journey that we take people on. And yeah, so people have really found that intriguing for a start, and they've been looking forward to going into their work with a more open mindset. I don't have to have all the answers. What if I just listen better to this person? What would open up if we just had this conversation rather than the one we've been going round and round with for however long?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really, really nice to see the shifts that have been going on.
Oh, that's great. And you know what? It occurs to me when you were drawing us that visual picture of, you know, what we know, or all the knowledge in the world, and then what we know is such a small portion of that goes right back to our initial conversation about imagining our future. You know, and you were sort of imagining two things, the good outcome or the not so good outcome. And really, outside of that, as you said, there's so much else that's available to us and possible. And yeah, that happens in every area of our life, both personally and professionally.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And it has been one of the examples that I've used when we talk about uncovering blind spots, because it was such a blind spot for me, and I didn't realize that there was more to see, even though I kept asking and asking. It didn't feel like there was more to see until there was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because you know, when we're holding really tight to something that feels very binary, you know, it's either this or it's that. As that tumble dryer phrase that you use is so good, because you just keep going back and forth between, well, it's either this or it's that, and neither of them feel good. You know, or yeah, maybe my attachment to one feels really clingy, and then I'm desperately unhappy about the other, and that's such an extreme way to feel. And I can just picture you kind of bouncing back and forth between the two. And then when we open up and realize, oh, but there's more than that.
And that's I guess, to anybody listening, that's such an important point, because, you know, I'd love for people to see that if you feel like there's only two choices and neither of them feel good, then you're not seeing the whole picture. And maybe you can take some comfort in knowing that there's more to see here, even if you can't see it yet. There's something more to see. That's a really good point.
Yeah. And one of the things that you talk about on your website about the Alchemy Academy is the connection between our thinking and stress. And so I wondered if you could talk about stress a little bit with us now, and just share what you see and what stress really is, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of the other side of that resilience conversation, isn't it? We like to talk about this as a subtractive psychology, and I think that's a phrase that Jamie Smart probably coined in the first place, but it articulates it perfectly for us, that we're about taking things off people's mind. We're not about adding things to someone's already overwhelming to-do list. Oh, you've got your overwhelming to-do list, but we'd like you to meditate for 10 minutes, and we'd like you to go for a walk in nature and pet your dog and whatever. So this is really about taking things off people's minds. And in relation to stress, I think that's kind of it, really. The stress is an internal experience. It's not caused by the outside world, although it might very much look like it is. Going back to the conversation earlier in the piece where we talked about we miss thought out of the equation. We leave this world of thought out of our equation of experience, and we look at circumstances and we think, oh, no wonder I'm stressed. My to-do list is 3 miles long. Of course I'm stressed. Whereas, in the conversation that we might have with people when we talk about stress, we will kind of bring thought to light. We'll shine a light on thought, as it were, and help people understand what role that's playing, which is 100% of the role in the experience that they're having of that 3 mile long to-do list. Because really, when it comes down to it, no one can achieve all the to-dos on the 3 mile long to-do list. And when we get all the stories about that out of the way, when we subtract the stories about what that means about me if I can't do it right, what my manager's going to think, what my colleagues are going to think, how am I going to do this? I'm going to have to stay up all night, blah, 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 blah. I'm neglecting my family. We have so many stories that when we look at the 3 mile long to-do list, that come into play. And when we can kind of bring that into the light and put the stories to one side for a minute and look at the to-do list with a bit more clarity and less noise, then it becomes much more obvious what on the to-do list we can say we're not going to do. We can put off, we can get an extension on, whatever it is. We can have a conversation with the manager and say, look, this is my 3 mile long to-do list. It's not humanly possible. Here are the things that I think are a priority. What do you think? And it's a much more neutral conversation than the, oh my goodness, I can't do this. My life is, going to implode. So that's really, I guess, the relationship between thought and stress in a nutshell. And that's kind of where we point people in that stress conversation. And as we said, it's about subtraction. So it's taking away some of that noise that's going on, or helping you to see past it to the clarity and the creativity that's waiting in that space.
Yeah, I love that you bring up that, it's so common outside of this understanding when people are dealing with stress to add to what they're supposed to be doing. And I remember back in my corporate days feeling the pressure of that, that I'm, in order to manage this, I should be doing more. And it was, already feeling impossible. Yeah.
Buckle down and work longer and work harder. And actually, one of the things that we're talking about at the moment among the three of us, and that we're working on some things to put out into the world, is this concept of doing more with less, because that's a real phrase in business at the moment, but it's perhaps not intended the way that we would intend it. In business, it's talking about actually physically doing more, but we'll give you less resources and less stuff to do that with.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a welcome message to the people who have the 3 mile long to-do list, who already can't get through that. So when we talk about doing more with less, we're talking about doing more creativity, more collaboration, more clarity, more did I say creativity yet? All those good things. more calm, more decisiveness, more accountability, more of all of the things that we would like to be doing more of in our work and in our lives in general, actually. And with less on our mind, less of the noise, less of the insecurity, indecisiveness, less of the overwhelm, the stress, the mental blocks, the friction between colleagues or family or whatever, however it's manifesting. So that's our kind of version of doing more with less, which I like.
That is lovely. Yeah. 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 Because when we're stressed, our thinking adds so much more to the pile of stuff that's already there.
Does it
And
ever?
I was at, in March, I was at a weekend with Michael Neal and Barbara Patterson. And yeah, Michael talked about the difference between overwhelmed and overworked. And when we feel that feeling of overwhelm, we could have two things to do, but just be out of our minds with stress and worry because there's so much thinking going on. And I thought that was such a good example, or, I guess example of what that feels like, and how our thinking gets so involved in whatever's going on, with us physically.
But it's in our language, right? Isn't it? It's, I've got a stressful job. I've had a stressful day. This is a stressful situation. And we, in all of those constructs, it's the circumstances or the situation or the event that's doing it to us, and we are at the mercy of it. And it's, it is by nature, it is the victim mentality. And a lot of us wouldn't want to think that we are in a victim mentality, but that's what that is. And it's so liberating to start to see, oh, hang on, I'm not at the mercy of that stuff. What's going on here is that I've got a lot of thinking, and that's a different story. I don't need to wait for those circumstances to change before I can feel different, because I'll feel different when my thinking changes. And that's a much more hopeful, helpful kind of place to be coming from, to me. Much more empowered, if you like.
Yes, exactly. Yes, because when a job is stressful, quote unquote, it tends to feel like this mountain kind of looming over us. And we start to think of, well, what can I do to change that mountain? And that itself becomes insurmountable, so realizing, that it's going on in our minds, and that's what we have basically agency over, changes the game completely.
It's like taking a look behind the curtain, pulling back the curtain and seeing what's going on behind the scenes, because it's so invisible to us most of the time. Until someone has, as happened to me when I started on this journey with Jamie, someone pointed it out to me, and then I could just see it everywhere, how it was playing out in my life. And I haven't stopped. Which is quite
Right. Yeah. Well, as we're coming close to the end of our time here, I want to ask, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share about today?
I feel like we've covered quite a lot of ground.
We really have.
No, I don't think there's anything else that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. And where can we find out more about you and your work?
Well, I'm on all of the, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram under my name, Vivienne Edgecombe. I've got a website, vivienneedgecombe.com. And we've also got the alchemyacademy.co.uk website, which is all our alchemy stuff.
Okay, great. So I will put links in the show notes at unbrokenpodcast.com to those things, so people can find you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Vivienne. It's been so great chatting with you. And thank you for being with me here today.
That's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alexandra.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.